Hi, my name is Jennifer Turner, and I'd like to welcome you to the Woodrow Wilson Center. Since we have a lot of new people, should let you know that the Wilson Center was created in 1968 as a memorial to our 28th president, who is both a scholar and a policymaker, our only PhD president. And so in his spirit, we have 20-some projects and programs here that we put on meetings, do publications, information clearinghouses on foreign policy issues. I've been hanging out in the China area. The China Environment Forum has been serving practitioners around the world on working in the energy and environmental spheres for 14 years. And I've been here 12 as of next month. And water is a big passion of mine. I did my dissertation on it. Some of you heard me talk about it this morning. I did boring stuff. I didn't do dams because I wanted to get my dissertation done back then. Now you can do dissertations on dams. But no, I did water policy, water withdrawal permits, and local center relations. It's still fun stuff. It's fun too. And so today we have 3 dam gurus who they're going to guide us through a conversation. The water puns will not stop, okay? I should warn you now. They're going to guide us through a conversation on the challenges and opportunities for sustainable dams in China. There are actually a lot of the people in the room here, and you'll notice that there's a lot of water people here today. They're here for a kind of a closed expert meeting that Oregon State University and Hobart and William Smith College is running here. I've been informed that I am the hostess of the meeting. Yes. So we've got a lot of dam experts here as well. So there's intelligence not only up on the panel, but in the room. So we're looking forward to a fast and furious discussion. Let's see, and I wanted to note, and you should know too that the meeting was support from your end, supported by NSF, yes. National Science Foundation, give them a shout out. And my project for this meeting is supported by Vermont Law School and USAID. We got to give a shout out to the people that support this good stuff. You have the bios, so I'm going to be brief. We're going to start out today with Professor WANG Hao, who is, he's really he's the water man in China. He's been working on hydrology and water resources for about 30 years, and he wears many hats. He's not only the director of water resources of the China Institute for Water Resources and Hydropower Research, he's also in the Chinese Academy of Engineering. He directs the State Key Laboratory on Simulation and Regulation of Water Cycle and River Basins, and it goes on and on. But he's also been very involved in a lot of research in a lot of the key projects in each of the 5-year plans over the past 15 years, looking at water, and won numerous awards. I couldn't even list them all because they would push these other 2 guys' bios off the sheet, right? So, so he is truly an expert. You are really the 我佩服你很多. So 你应该说哪里 right? No, he's a modest guy too. But he's going to start us off to give us a little context on the importance of what's happening in dams in China. It's going to move fast. He knows a lot of you know this, but it's good to hear his opinion on where dams are going and some of the trends. And then we're going to have Douglas Smith, who is a sustainability specialist at International Hydropower Association, and his work has been focused recently on the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Protocol. And I'm not going to tell you much about it. The name says much because that's what he's going to talk about. Okay. So so he's worked 3 years in China. Yeah. Working with different World Banking and other financial types, and so he knows a lot about China too. Because remember, the theme is sustainability of dams in China. So we kind of made sure that everyone was talking on the topic somewhat close. And Desiree Tullos, she's an associate professor in the Biological and Ecological Engineering department at Oregon State University, and she's going to be talking about an interdisciplinary dam assessment modeling project that she's been involved with. This is all this NSF-funded stuff, right? And that highlights some of the analytical tools that are needed to help make dams more sustainable, which is also what Doug you're doing about too. We can't avoid dams, right? Mm-hmm. There's debate on that, but dams are coming. They're viewed as low carbon, and China's numero uno in building them. So we're going to start out with, we're going to invite Professor WANG Hao to speak, and Tseng Yuan is going to be our interpreter for his comments today. And your job is to listen carefully, think of really hard questions. The speakers will each be speaking for 20 minutes, and then you guys come on board. Are you ready? Yeah. I used to be a kindergarten teacher. I need some response out here. All right, Professor Wang.
女士们、先生们，大家上午好。 我来自中国水利水电科学研究院。我今天演讲的题目是中国大坝建设的机遇与挑战。
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is WANG Hao. I'm from China Institute for Water Resources and Hydropower Research. My presentation for you today is on the opportunities and challenges facing dams development in China.
首先，我想用几个实例介绍一下大坝在中国社会可持续发展中的地位和作用。
First, I'd like to share with you some case studies, and by using case studies, I want to illustrate the roles and functions of dam development in China as well as its sustainability in Chinese society.
第一个实例是三峡，长江三峡水利工程就是一个依托大型水利工程的强大功能，提升流域整体协调发展功能的这么一个成功的范例。
First, I'm going to talk about the Three Gorge project, and this is a successful case that has greatly enhanced the integrated and coordinated development of the river basin.
三峡水库呢，最重要的功能是防洪。工程建成后啊，将保护下游富饶的汉江平原和大武汉等重要城市。它可把上游100年一遇的洪峰削减到10年一遇左右。
The greatest function of the Three Gorge project is flood control, and it protects Jianghan Plain and Wuhan City by reducing the 100-year flood to a 10-year flood through the huge reservoir capacity.
即使遇到1000年一遇的特大洪水，配合运用分洪工程呢，也可以使中下游武汉等重要城市和江汉平原避免毁灭性的灾害。
Also, in case of a 100-year flood event, the downstream major cities and regions can also be protected from suffering catastrophic damages.
其次呢，三峡电站拥有世界上最大的发电功能，水电装机呢达到22500兆瓦，提供的清洁能源呢，直接为中国的华中、华东、华南和重庆市广大地区服务，促进区域经济社会的可持续发展，同时相当于累计减少使用3400万吨标准煤和减少排放7480万吨的二氧化碳和68万吨的二氧化硫。
The Three Gorge Hydropower Station has the world's largest installed capacity of 22,500 megawatt, and it provides clean power to middle, south, and east of China, including a city of Chongqing, and it has greatly improved the energy supply in that area. And its capacity is equivalent of the coal reduction of 34 million tons of coal use, and also it's equivalent to the reduction of 74.8 million tons of CO2 emission and 680,000 tons of SO2 emission as well.
第三呢，三峡拥有很好的航运功能，它有世界上最大的船闸，工程建成后可极大的改善有黄金水道之称的长江干流的这个通航能力，长江的年货运量可提高到3亿吨，运输成本可以降低35%到37%。
The Three Gorges Hydro Project has the world's largest navigation lock, which greatly improves the navigation capacity of the mainstream of Yangtze River. Yangtze River, as you all know, is the golden waterway, and because of the project, the inland navigation capacity has been greatly enhanced and extended. Now, currently, we see a shipment volume of 300 million tons, and the cost of the transportation has reduced by 35 to 37%.
因在防洪、发电、航运、 供水等方面的巨大功能。三峡保证了中下游江河安澜，为促进中国中部、东部、西部三大地带间的协调发展发挥了重要作用。
Because of its great function and capacity in flood control, power generation, and water supply and irrigation, the Three Gorges project has been playing a tremendous role in the social and economic development of this part of China.
第二个水电开发的例子是黄河。黄河水少沙多，淤积严重，是世界上著名的地上悬河。由于水资源短缺，黄河流域过去不得不以牺牲生态来维系经济增长。
Well, the second case I'd like to share with you is the Yellow River. As you know, Yellow River is known as a river above ground because it has a high sand volume and relatively low water volume. And in the past, a lot of the projects have not been successful, and they all aimed at sacrificing environment for economic development.
20世纪80、90年代，黄河下游几乎年年断流。1997年，下游的干流断流达到226天，河道严重萎缩，河流功能基本丧失，引起了全世界的关注。
Well, we see in the 1980s and 1990s, and the Huanghe flow stopped multiple times, especially in 1997. And the stop of the flow was very serious. And you see riverbed shrinking, and the entire function of the river disappeared.
小浪底工程建成投入运行后，中国政府把黄河不断流、河床不抬高作为水库运用的主要目标，对小浪底控制性水利工程的运行调度提出了更高的要求，要求水库不仅要防洪、发电、供水等作用，同时要在恢复河道生态功能方面发挥重要作用。
And after the Xiaolangdi project was completed, and a high standard was set for the reservoir operation, and it's targeting at no river desiccation nor riverbed elevation. So the project should not only play a role of flood control, power generation, water supply, and irrigation, but also it's aimed to play an important role of restoring the ecological function of the river region.
从1999年4月开始，黄河开始了系统的调水调沙生态调度，通过人工创造较大流量，有效冲刷了下游河床。
Starting in April of 1999, the unified water regulation has been conducted for Yellow River, aiming at improving its water flow and restoring the lower ridge ecosystem.
这样，黄河下游主要河槽的最小行洪能力，从原来的不足1800个流量，提高到了4000个流量，大大提高了黄河下游安全行洪的可靠度，保障黄河下游连续9年不断流，河道功能全面恢复，黄河河口三角洲湿地生态环境有效改善，对下游区域人民的正常生产生活发展，有了大幅度的这个机会。
If we look at the achievements of this unified water regulations, we see there's a very effective increase in the capacity of flushing away the riverbed sediment in the lower reach of the river, and it has increased from 1,800 to 4,000. And it has also resulted in an increase of the minimum floodway capacity in the lower river channel. And we see the improved reliability of safety flood discharge in the lower river channel as well, ensuring there's no river desiccation or in the Yellow River for 9 consecutive years. And we also see the recovering of the ecological function of the river, the improved ecosystem of wetland at the Yellow River Delta area, and the capacity for ensuring water supply to the domestic production use has also increased significantly.
第3个实例是中国四川的雅龙江下游，像这幅图所示的这样，是二滩水电站。
The third case study I'd like to share with you is the Ertan Reservoir, which is located at the lower reach of the Yalong River in Sichuan Province.
它是一个双曲拱坝，坝高位列世界第3。
And the Ertan Reservoir has a concrete double curvature arch dam, which has the third height in the world.
它是20世纪三峡建成前中国最大的水电站。
It's the largest hydropower station in China before the Three Gorge project was completed.
二滩水电站的总装机达到3300兆瓦，240米高的混凝土双曲拱坝在世界排第3位。在整个工程建设的各个阶段，始终坚持生态环境和流域经济社会协调发展的目标。
3300, okay. And the installed power capacity of the Ertan Reservoir is 3,300 MW, and throughout its design and completion, the goal of environmental sustainability has always been adhered to.
世界银行一直把二滩水电站作为世行贷款项目的优秀工程推荐给其他发展中国家。
World Bank has always been recommending or using Ertan Reservoir as a successful example in terms of development, dam development, and has been advocating this to the other developing countries.
由于二滩工程在支持流域区域和谐发展和长期致力于生态保护，采取积极有效的生态措施改善流域环境。2006年获得了中国建设项目环境保护的最高奖——国家环境友好工程奖，成为水利水电工程建设中里程碑式的工程之一。
Because of its significant achievement in ecological protection and sustainability in the area where it's built, the Ertan Reservoir was awarded in the year of 2006 the National Environmental Friendly Project Award, and which is a landmark, which also makes it a landmark hydro projects in China.
第4个例子是紫坪铺水利枢纽，它位于岷江上游，就是像这个图示的地方。库容达到11亿立方米，该工程2000年开始建设，2006年投入运行。工程建设和运行过程中，始终把安全生产放在首位。在2008年5.12汶川地震中，大坝经受住了8级多地震的考验。使其成为当今世界上第一座在震中遭受8级地震仍安全运行的100米以上的混凝土面板堆石坝。
The next case study is the Pingpu Hydro Project, which is located on the upper Minjiang River in Sichuan Province as well. This is a concrete-faced rock-filled dam, and it has a capacity of 1.1 billion cubic meter. And as you all know, that it withstood the 2008 magnitude 8 earthquake, and it was actually located very close to the epicenter. It's probably the only dam that's higher than 100 meters and also withstood a magnitude 8 earthquake.
水库大坝距离震源仅17公里，地震发生后 大坝出现较大的水平和垂直变位，电站机组停机，内外系统全部断电。
The reservoir is only located 17 kilometers away from the epicenter. After the earthquake, there are vertical and horizontal dislocations of the reservoir, and the power generation was stopped, and everything came to a halt.
地震之后，水库采取了一系列应急措施，保证了水库安全运行。子平铺大坝的安全，确保了下游1000多万人口在紧急状态下的人心稳定，确保了下游地区在非常时期的供水安全，确保了下游地区的电力供应，同时形成了一条水上生命救急通道。
A series of emergency measures were taken place after the earthquake occurred, and to make sure the reservoir was safe. And indeed, it was. In a way, it ensured the safety and water supply and power generation for population for over 10 million population downstream, and also created water lifeway for earthquake relief.
第5个例子在珠江三角洲广州附近。
And the fifth case study is in the Pearl River Delta in the vicinity of Guangzhou.
珠江三角洲毗邻港澳，是中国城市最密集、经济最发达的区域之一。
And Pearl River Delta is very close to Hong Kong and Macau. It has a very high population density and also has high economic development as well.
在珠江河口三角洲地区经济社会发展过程中，由于珠江上游来水连续偏枯，海平面上升，流域经济社会用水持续增长和气候变化等多方面因素的影响，导致三角洲河道内流量持续减少，海水的咸潮上溯日趋严重，威胁到了澳门和珠海等城市居民饮用水水质的安全。
Okay, because of the in this area, because of the upstream of Pearl River Basin continues to suffer rainfall shortage and also the increased water use by the watershed areas for growth and development, and this resulted in rising sea levels, and the river estuary continues to decline, and we see salty tide back, and this has become frequent and serious, and this has been threatening the drinking water quality and the water security of the Zhuhai and Aumen area, Macau area.
为保证珠江三角洲地区供水安全，国家防汛抗旱总指挥部紧急实施了珠江口统一调度，进行压咸水、补淡水的应急调水工程，实现了珠江上游8座水库的联合调度。整个调水涉及到贵州、广西、广东3省以及西江、北江的沿线，调水线路长达1336公里。
In order to solve this problem, the Office of State Flood Control and Drought Relief has urgently implemented water transfer for Pearl River Delta and to push back to fight the salty water invasion. And this is a very big project, and by the joint operation of 8 upstream reservoirs of the entire river basin. It's totally, it has a transportation line of over 1,300 kilometers flowing across Guizhou, Guangxi, and Guangdong province.
这个珠江三角洲一共每年平均增加调水量8.5亿立方米，使澳门珠三角地区1500万人的饮用水得到了保障。
Okay, the total transfer water quantity to Zhujiang River Delta is about 8.5 billion cubic meters, and this has guaranteed the drinking water of this population, this area. That's about 15 million people.
刚才呢介绍了5个例子，说明了这个大坝在中国经济社会可持续发展中的作用。下面呢讲第2部分，大坝建设的国家需求和战略机遇。
Just now I've shared the 5 case studies with you, trying to illustrate the function and roles a dam plays in the sustainable development in Chinese society. Now next, I'm going to talk about the opportunities and challenges facing dam development and construction in China.
当前呢，中国进入了一个发展的关键时期。根据预测，到2030年，中国的人口将达到15亿，经济呢还要快速增长。中国经济发展目标是到2020年，要达到这个翻一番的目标。GDP 在2000年的基础上要翻2番，2020年在2000年基础上。
China has reached a critical moment in its development, and first we talk about the population. The population growth, I think, will reach 1.5. It is estimated to reach 1.5 billion by 2030, and the economic development will continue, and it's expected to quadruple the 2000 GDP by 2020.
到2030年的时候，大约60%以上的人口要生活在城市。
By 2030, the urbanization in China is estimated to be 60%.
其次呢，大坝建设呀，要满足应对气候变化的需要。
继续按。
Also, the construction of dams in China also need to meet the demand on national target for adapting to climate change.
2009年呢，中国政府宣布，2020年中国的单位国内生产总值的二氧化碳排放啊，要比2005年下降40%到45%，作为约束性指标纳入这个中长期规划。
Well, in 2009, Chinese government announced its goal, which is reduce the GDP CO2 emission intensity by 40 to 45% by year 2020, and this is a binding and a compulsory goal that is included in the midterm and long-term planning of the state.
通过大力发展可再生能源，推进核电建设等行动，到2020年，中国的非化石能源要占一次能源消费比重的15%左右。
So also, by year 2020, we expected to see the use of non-fossil fuels to account for 15% of primary energy consumption in China.
2005年呢，中国的国内生产总值二氧化碳的排放量为这个每万元3.0吨。到2020年呢，二氧化碳排放要比2005年降低40%到45%。
Well, if we look at the chart here, in year 2005, we see the CO2 emission per unit GDP, which is 10,000 RMB, is 3 tons. But we expected to reduce that by 40% by year 2020.
到2020年呢，单位 GDP 的二氧化碳排放将由2005年的2.72吨每万元降低到1.22吨每万元。
So by year 2020, we expected to reduce the CO2 emission per unit GDP from the 2.7 ton of year 2005 to 1.2 by the 1.2 ton by year 2020.
即便如此呢，中国的二氧化碳排放总量还要继续上升，达到77亿吨。
Even with this measure, the CO2 emission in China is still expected to increase and will reach 7.7 billion tons.
如果仍然按照目前的排放水平，到时候排放总量会达到171亿吨。也就是说，中国未来要削减二氧化碳排放294亿吨。
294 ，OK， 94吗
？94亿吨。
So if the emission continues to if emission continues at its current pace, and China is expected to emit over 17 billion tons of CO2. But even with the reduction measures, it's still a very tough goal, and we're expected to reduce it by 9.4 billion tons of CO2 by year 2020, using this drastic reduction measure of 40% of decrease.
因此呢，这是一个艰巨的任务。
So this is a very tough task.
第三方面呢，中国建设大坝是保证能源安全的需要。
The third aspect that I'd like to talk about is the dam construction in China is for national safety, national energy safety.
中国呢是世界上仅次于美国的第2大能源消费国，煤炭的消费量呢超过70%，石油的对外依存度呢超过50%。
China is the second largest energy consumption country in the world, and okay. So and then 70% of the energy consumption comes from coal.
石油的对外依存度
And also the dependence of imported oil is more than 50%.
在中国呢，火电一直是电力能源供应中的主导。2008年呢，占81%。在整个电力供应中，火电占81%。
If we look at the statistics from 2008, coal-fired plant generated 81% of the entire energy in China.
日本大地震引发的这个核电站泄露，未来的核电发展呢还有一定的不确定性。水电作为可再生能源呢。这个开发力度将会进一步提高，在中国。
If we look at the recent nuclear power plant explosion and leakage in Japan, that reveals there are a lot of unpredictabilities, uncertainties in nuclear power development in the future. So in my opinion, hydropower has a lot more potential as a form of renewable energy.
第4个需求呢，是中国建设大坝要保障供水安全。
And the fourth aspect is the national water security.
这个极端的天气事件，特别是大的干旱呢，近年来频繁发生。
Extremely weather conditions occur very frequently in recent years.
中国面临严重的水资源短缺， 600多个城市中，400多个城市面临不同程度的缺水。
China is facing very serious water shortage among its over 600 cities. Over 400 of them facing water shortage to various degree.
第5方面呢，中国建设大坝是为了抗御自然灾害的需要。
And the fifth aspect is for natural disaster prevention or relief.
每年呢，中国因为洪水、滑坡、泥石流这方面呢，都有这个老百姓的生命财产遭受了不小的损失。
Every year, flood, mudslide, all these natural disasters cause severe loss and damage to human lives and property.
但是现在从现状看呢，面临着这些需求啊，中国的大坝建设还显得滞后。
Well, when we are facing all these demands and needs, the dam construction in China seems to be lagging behind.
首先呢，是中国的这个储水设施建设明显不足。
First, it's manifested is in the insufficient storage capacity, water storage capacity in China.
一个国家拥有的人均水库库容、人均水电发电量，与国家的经济社会发展水平呢有紧密的联系。按照这个观点分析全球100多个国家2007年的这个发展数据显示啊，这个 HDI 大于0.9的国家，人均库容拥有量呢是2924立方米。HDI 介于这个0.8到0.9的国家呢，人均库容拥有量是2476立方米。HDI 介于0.7到0.8的国家呢，人均库容是571立方米。HDI 介于0.6到0.7的国家呢，人均库容拥有量212立方米。
Well, we noticed that the storage capacity per capita as well as the hydropower development per capita of a country has both of them have close association with the socioeconomic development of a society. If we look at the statistics from the year 2007, we notice that if you look at the Human Development Index, those countries who have a HDI that's higher than 0.9, and their hydropower generation per capita is well over 2,900 cubic meter. And for those countries who are between HDI 0.8 and 0.9, and their hydropower generation capacity is 2,400 cubic meter. And for countries between 0.7 and 0.8, and their capacity is about 500 cubic meter. And for countries between 0.6 and 0.7, and their hydropower generation capacity is little over 200 cubic meter.
中国的人均库容量呢，也就是美国的20%。
And if we look at the average storage capacity per capita in China, it is actually only 20% that of the United States.
这是典型国家的人均库容。这个中国的人均库容只有这个521立方米，排在最后。美国的人均库容接近5000立方米。
Well, this chart shows the storage capacity per capita in different countries. If you look at China, it's actually at the very end. It's a little over. It's actually only 521 cubic meters, and if you look at United States, it's over 5,000 cubic meter.
中国水电开发的程度也显得明显不足，这是各大洲水电开发的情况。像欧洲都到了71%，中国只是23%。
And also, China is really insufficient in hydropower development compared to other regions. If you look at this chart, and if you look at Europe, and the percentage of hydropower generation to its economic potential, and Europe is 71%, and China only has 23%.
人均发电量呢，中国也低得可怜，时间关系就不细说了。
And also the hydropower generation per capita in China is also very low. I won't elaborate on that because of time restriction.
中国的水电装机呢，现在仅占6%，低于世界平均水平4个百分点。水电的开发度23%，低于世界平均水平10个百分点。火电的装机81%，高于世界平均水平20个百分点。
Well, if we look at China, we notice that the hydropower generation capacity accounts for 16% of the national capacity. It's lower than the world average by 4%. And hydropower development degree is about 23%, lower than the world's average by 10 percentage points. And also we notice that the thermal power generation capacity in China accounts for 81% of the total energy generation in China, and more than the world average by 20 percentage points.
考虑到上述情况呢，中国政府决定在未来的10年呢，投资4万亿兴修水利，包括建设一些大坝。
Okay. All things considered, the Chinese government has decided to invest 4 trillion yuan in the next 10 years to construct hydropower projects.
但是呢，中国的大坝开发呢也有不少的问题。
At the same time, there are various issues existing in dam development in China as well.
最大的一个问题是对移民的照顾不够。
And one of the biggest is its insufficient attention to immigrants, people who are forced to relocate because of the dam construction.
第二方面呢是大坝的生态环境保护问题，特别是大坝兴建阻断了洄游性鱼类的这个生存环境。
And the second issue has to do with the environmental protection or the environmental disruption of the dam construction for fish and the various water species.
再有呢，就是大坝本身的安全和长期运行问题。
And the third aspect would be the safety and security of the dam structure itself, as well as its long-term operation safety.
最后呢，说一下结论。
And to conclude,
大坝已经成为经济社会不可或缺的重要组成部分。中国呢，未来还需要建设更多的大坝，但是呢，要更加注重移民问题，生态保护问题。
And we know that in China, dam construction development has become a very important part of the socioeconomic fabric. And in the future, more dams will be built in China, but at the same time, we need to pay more attention to solve issues such as ecological immigration and environmental protection.
谢谢 ，Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wow, that was like a semester's class in one PowerPoint, and he did it. I like it. All right, so now you all educated on dams, and we got a good background, the movement towards green dams. And I think that, we've got some action over here. We're going to have Doug and Desiree give us talking about kind of like assessing, going a little bit further in those last slides that he gave us, a good segue for you. And how do we assess that they are sustainable?
Yes, that's a good
and that
question.
they are safe.
How do we find the slides?
How do we find the slides? I don't know why she leapt up there, but yeah.
I have to see here.
Actually, I'll just begin with what I was going to say on the title slide anyway. My name's Doug Smith. I'm a sustainability specialist with IHA, International Hydropower Association. Jennifer gave an introduction to me before, so I won't go on about myself in any more detail. What I'm going to talk about today is a couple of things. First of all, IHA's activities in China. And then secondly, the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Protocol, which is a framework agreed by a multi-stakeholder forum over the past couple of years for assessing sustainability of hydropower facilities anywhere in the world. So let's just...
Her PowerPoint slide overtook the computer.
Yeah.
Just wait, I think
here,
it's...
here, I find
Here we
it,
go,
I
okay.
find it.
All right. You know those Chinese, the Chinese language? There we go. All right.
I find it. Wait a moment.
Yeah.
Close that PowerPoint.
I'll carry on. First of all, the International Hydropower Association, I should give you a little bit of background on us. We're an industry association with members in more than 80 countries in the world.
I think I found it.
Wait, let Pete do it.
It's on the desktop.
It's on the, no, we can only see it on
but-
the screen.
No, I think it's okay. I recite the
Come on,
property.
Jake, let Pete do it. He knows where it is. Okay? He's got it. It's on the bottom right here. So we got it. Okay, we got it.
Sorry
Yeah,
about
the
that.
rest-
Okay. Right. I went through the title slide. So, International Hydropower Association. As I was saying, is an industry association. We have members in more than 80 countries in the world. Our members are any organizations involved in hydropower. That includes developers and operators of hydropower facilities. It also includes institutes, for example, IWHR, WANG Hao's institute is a member of ours, and we have a growing number of members in China.
Where's the-
Our mission is to advance sustainable hydropower. We were originally established by UNESCO in 1995 to promote and disseminate good practice in the industry. Our key initiatives are not only sustainability, but also climate change. We have a program looking at greenhouse gas emissions from reservoirs. We also have a program on water and another one looking at markets and incentives. Our activities in China, as I said, we have a number of members there, and IWHR manages our membership for us in China and effectively manages a national office. We're hoping to grow the amount of activity that we have in China. Some of the things that we've been doing over the past few years are on the screen. For example, we carried out a trial assessment of a project, a trial of the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Protocol in 2009. We also had Chinese members of the multi-stakeholder forum which developed the Sustainability Assessment Protocol, which I'll tell you a bit more about in a second. We've recently held some workshops, one of which concerned greenhouse gas emissions from reservoirs, and also a workshop jointly hosted with WWF China in Kunming, working with Hydropower Lansang to build their capacity in understanding of sustainability. So what is the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Protocol? You'll see I've got a couple of copies of it with me today. In essence, it's a framework for assessing sustainability of facilities according to a defined set of topics concerning sustainability. So it's a framework for carrying out an assessment. It can be applied at 4 different stages of the development of a project, including early stage, prior to feasibility studies, preparation, when all of the feasibility studies are being prepared, implementation during construction of the project, and then operation. The key thing to remember about the protocol is that it was developed by this multi-stakeholder forum, which involved NGOs, in particular WWF and the Nature Conservancy, but also Oxfam and Transparency International. Government agencies were involved, financial institutions, including private sector, equator banks, as well as development banks, such as the World Bank. And they worked for over 2 years thrashing out this text, which is the body of the protocol. Now, I mentioned that there are a number of topics. Now, for each of those 4 stages that I mentioned, there is a topic, a list of topics defined. So there are over 20 altogether. I think about 25. So for example, for the preparation stage of a project, you would assess the project according to those 20 different topics, including environmental, social, economic, governance, institutional issues. And I look forward to seeing how they compare with the topics in the IDAM project tomorrow. I just want to re-emphasize again the final point there. The protocol is recognized by leading NGOs. WWF said recently during the launch is that it's a valuable tool to measure and improve the sustainability of hydropower projects. Just a little bit more on its evolution. As I said, it took over 3 years to develop by the multi-stakeholder forum. More recently, we have launched the protocol at the World Congress on Hydropower recently held in Brazil. We were able to do that because we have now agreed terms and conditions for the use of the protocol and also a charter which will govern the protocol with a similar range of stakeholders, NGOs and government agencies and so on. And it took quite some work to thrash out that charter, that constitution, as well as the terms and conditions. They are now available on our website, hydrosustainability.com.org. And they set out the rules which will govern the use of this document. We're very excited at this stage to see how, well, to implement the use of the protocol. It's going to take some effort to establish the body of accredited assessors that the industry needs to carry out protocol assessments. But we're working very hard at IHA to get it up and running right now. As I mentioned earlier, there was a trial assessment in 2009, one of 20 different trial assessments carried out in China. This was of the Shuibuya project in Hubei province on the Shuibuya River. This is just a picture of some of the consultation activities which were undertaken during that assessment. Actually, the protocol was a little different in 2009, and hence the reason for the trialing. And this was one of the trials which led to the revision of the protocol. So at that stage, 24 different topics were assessed for the Shuibuya project. It's actually on the Qingjiang River in Hubei, 1,840 megawatts, relatively large. It's got the highest crest height in the world, I understand, at 223 meters. The trial assessment was carried out by a multidisciplinary team, all Chinese, and including WWF and the Nature Conservancy in China. The conclusions were quite interesting. They were that on the economic aspects, the dam outperformed its above expectations. It was earning a net income far higher than was originally envisaged prior to its development. It was developed in 2002, by the way. Whilst on environmental and social issues, there was good performance, but some of the institutional requirements, for example, the implementation of the environmental management plan, which was proposed in the EIA document, had not been implemented. And so the trial assessment was able to make recommendations concerning improvements which should be made, as well as recommendations for improvement of the protocol itself. Now, I'm hoping that in the coming years as we go forward, we will be able to implement protocol assessments, or the industry will be able to implement protocol assessments to find those recommendations for a great number of hydropower projects in China. I think it will take some effort to get there, because we'll need to translate the document effectively and, of course, set up sufficient numbers of trained, accredited assessors to carry out protocol assessments in China. So it will take some effort, but we're looking forward to pushing that ahead. Finally, what an official protocol assessment delivers, I just want to run through. And this is really, Desiree asked me as we were coming up here, so why would an organization carry out a protocol assessment? Mm-hmm. And I would say it's because it delivers an evidence-based, objective assessment of a project's performance, prepared by an assessor who has been accredited and has to fulfill a code of conduct. It will deliver recommendations that the developer or the operator can act upon to improve their performance in specific areas. Those recommendations will be related to a score of 1 to 5 for each of those topics or aspects that I referred to earlier. And the scoring is related to basic good practice or proven best practice. So what they would get is a kind of easily communicable summary of their performance, so that they can see what the areas where they need to improve. They can discuss that with their stakeholders, whether they're regulators or NGOs or financial institutions, for example, and they can take steps to improve performance. And in summary, a protocol assessment provides a synthesis of information on very complex facilities and very complex sustainability issues into a concise and a presentable analysis, which is the basis for shared dialogue with stakeholders. Okay. So I'll finish there. I would encourage you, if you would like to know more about the protocol and about IHA's activities in China, including the trial assessment, then go to our website, which is hydrosustainability.org. Thanks.
Okay, some applause there. And actually, while I switch the slides over, can I ask you one question that you can, so you can talk while I do like the weird thing behind the screen? Was the Chinese? I noticed that some Chinese government agencies were involved in the assessment.
Yeah.
Do you have like the Ministry of Water Resources is interested and is on board on doing this with you? or making it part of their protocol?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, actually. We're working closely with IWHR, WANG Hao's Institute, to discuss exactly that kind of thing at the moment. And some of my colleagues will be traveling out to Beijing shortly to discuss the launch of the protocol in China. The IWHR is, of course, a government institute, so to that extent, the government is involved. Changjiang Water Resources Commission is one of our members, as is Three Gorges. And there is a lot to do, as I say, to implement the protocol in China, and that's what we'll be doing very shortly out there.
Yeah. And I should point out for people that don't know that, because again, I didn't want to embarrass WANG Hao any more than I already did, but his institute is actually the #1 research center think tank with the Ministry of Water Resources. So really, it is the hard-hitting place. Okay, technology has worked for us, and now you're gonna do it for us. Your own. Oh, here, you can have this mic.
Good morning. I want to start by thanking Jennifer and the Woodrow Wilson Center for having us here today to share some reflections on the concepts of sustainability and interdisciplinarity in dams. I've been working in China for the last 6 years, since 2005, on two NSF-funded grants with folks from Oregon State University, Hobart and William Smith Colleges, and Colby College. And the emphasis of our work has been to investigate interdisciplinary impacts of hydropower development on the New and Lancang rivers in China. It's been wildly adventurous. It's been a great learning experience and incredibly insightful. So my comments today are based primarily on our experiences with that research in the Three Parallel Rivers area. However, I've also been working in the U.S. on dam operations and impact mitigation, and it's striking to me how similar both the development paths and the social and environmental impacts and outcomes of dams are between China and the U.S. In both settings, in China and the U.S., I'm going to summarize the lessons that we've learned as a research team into these 3 key points, which I'll expand on each of individually. These 3 key points being that decision support tools are needed both to be developed and to be used, that salience, or how we value impacts and outcomes of dams, is quite important. And the third is that size matters, but in complex and I think maybe unintuitive ways. So on this first point, we all know that dams deliver important benefits, but often at a high price with adverse and lasting and sometimes irreversible impacts. So for many years, we've relied on analyzing economic benefits associated with single-purpose projects at the individual project scale. And it's clear why this paradigm has persisted. It's much simpler and easier than the alternative, where the alternative is to develop a transparent decision-making process that facilitates the design and planning of multi-purpose projects at the basin and regional scale, where all individuals who will be affected by the project have an equal voice, where a comprehensive effects analysis is undertaken and the results are published and publicly disseminated. Acknowledging the limitations of large hydropower development and the failure of decision-making process to protect people and the environment, industry, financiers, and regulators agreed that a more comprehensive view of how hydropower development could occur was needed. Thus, it was in 2000 that we heard comments like this from the chair of the World Commission on Dams. The dams have long escaped deep and clear impartial scrutiny into the process by which they emerge and are valued. We also heard from this commission that more equitable, interdisciplinary, and I lost my notes. And that more equitable and interdisciplinary analysis was needed on dams. Thanks. I can work from without them. And so there's a few key concepts associated with these comments that I think are important to emphasize. One from the comment from the chair, that we see both the words process and value embedded in this comment. And from the comment from the commission, we see equitable and interdisciplinary. And so I want to emphasize that those are really important concepts, but they're incredibly difficult to embrace and to understand. And so that the research our group has been doing has been trying to really investigate these pressure points and decision making about dams. And so I want to present today is some of the results of some of the research that we've been doing investigating those interdisciplinary sort of pressure points. And so I want to present a compelling example of why interdisciplinary is important in decision making about dams. This compelling example is of the Tonle Sap, the largest freshwater lake in Southeast Asia, which is an ecological hotspot in Cambodia. It's compelling because of the flow reversal that occurs in the summer monsoon season, which expands the lake ecosystem. The pulsing hydrology with its large floodplain, rich biodiversity, and high annual sediment and nutrient fluxes from the Mekong make the Tonle Sap the most productive inland fisheries in the world. It supports over 3 million people and provides 75% of Cambodia's inland fisheries catch and 60% of Cambodians' protein intake. However, hydropower development upstream on the Mekong is underway, and the relationship between the dams and flow reversals is still poorly understood. Further, the relationship between the dams and the livelihoods and welfare of Cambodians is even less understood. And finally, the impacts of transboundary policies to mitigate some of the effects of storage projects upstream has not been thoroughly investigated. So research has demonstrated how little attention we pay to the impacts of dams on people living downstream of the projects. They often aren't included in the process associated with decision-making about dams when we're considering costs and benefits. By taking a more interdisciplinary approach, though, we see more connections between people, politics, and the environment, including the need to consider the impacts of dams on people downstream. So this is how we set out to develop the justification that we were using to set out to develop a tool to help us better understand impacts, how they distribute across disciplines, across space, and across time, and to increase the transparency in the values that influence decisions about dams. This resulted in the IDAM tool that we'll be using tomorrow. It's IDAM stands for the Interdisciplinary Dam Assessment Modeling. And we've applied this to investigate a few research questions around and policy questions around hydropower development in China. The primary goals of this work have been to better understand the interdisciplinary impacts of projects we're studying, but also to investigate key elements of decision-making around transparency and equity in the process. So this is one example. These are results from some of the work that we've done. We're comparing, in this example, impacts of similar hydropower development, so similar size dams and megawatt generation capacity across two basins, the Lansong and the New Basin, where we have varying hydrogeology, economic and cultural isolation, and degrees of hydro development already in the basin. So these figures illustrate one of those comparisons between Maji Dam on the New River and Nojadu Dam on the Lansong River. The first set of figures, and I've been teaching a lot lately, so I'm going to try to point. Actually, maybe I'll just get up.
Use your laser. Red button.
I'd rather just point if you don't mind.
Right. But you can't be heard on the webcast if you go there, so I can give you a microphone.
Maybe
I'll solve your problem. Unless you can shout really loud.
I don't shout that loud. All right, so we have three pillars. We've organized this around the concept of sustainability that was developed at the Rio Convention in 1992, where we're organizing impacts associated with biophysical, socioeconomic, and geopolitical realms. So we've defined 7 indicators for each of the realms, and we're organizing them by biophysical, socioeconomic, and geopolitical. And what we can see from looking at these projects is that, for example, Maji Dam has a greater impact with respect to reservoir area, sediment, and flow modification. But when we start to compare the projects from a socioeconomic perspective, we see that Maji has greater benefits socioeconomically than the Nojadu project. And we see similarly, see the blue lines, sorry, I should have clarified, the blue lines are benefits, the yellowish brownish lines are costs. And so we see that we can start to look at how costs and benefits are distributing between projects, both in all 3 of these realms generally, but also with respect to individual impacts. And so we can compare, for example, the socioeconomic benefits of one project versus another, but also the benefits and costs associated with an individual project in these 3 different realms. And another example that I'll present later We compared the impacts of multiple small tributary hydropower development projects to large main stem projects to investigate the implications of international and domestic policies that advocate and provide blanket support for small hydropower development. So the goal of this tool, in large part, was to begin researching questions into policies and dam development strategies that advance sustainability. One of the key and unique elements of this project is that we developed an approach to documenting and visualizing how stakeholders view the importance of various impacts associated with this project. So we worked with a computer scientist to explore different visualizations, and this is one of the visualizations that we're using. And
I want to get up there again, I know.
What we've done is we poll experts to ask them about how important these various different impacts are to them as individuals, and then we visualize those results as what we're calling salience, both in terms of color saturation or color intensity, and in this figure it's also represented in terms of a width of the bar. So we have the magnitude of the impact, the objective magnitude of the impact, which is represented vertical extent, and then the salience, or about the importance that each individual assigns to an impact as the width and as the color saturation. And we have a few other figures, a spider diagram and amoeba diagram, we're trying to use to visualize the different dimensions, essentially, of project impacts. Thank you. So we've used this tool to investigate how values vary between stakeholders and to raise questions about how we apply different weights, both consciously and unconsciously, to impact analysis and how that might influence decision making. So it's interesting, some of the work we'll be presenting in a couple more slides, that we found that experts with different educational and experiential backgrounds tend to view the same impacts very differently based on their personal values and understanding of what those impacts mean. With respect to this first point, why interdisciplinary is so hard and why we've avoided it, I think, deeply for some period of time, is because it is difficult. And these are some of from developing the tools, some of the things that we've encountered in doing this interdisciplinary multi-criteria decision making. The first is the standardization of data and indicators. Everyone will argue that we don't have the right indicators, that they're not at the right scale, and particularly working in China where compiling data sets can be problematic. Much of the data that we worked with was considered NABU, or considered restricted under the State Secrets Act. It's often collected from multiple locations by different agencies. So it's critical to have some awareness then of what the reliability and uncertainty is in the data that you're using. Regarding the second point, we found that characterizing the distribution and mitigation of impacts was particularly challenging. For example, the responsibility of mitigation varies based on the size of the project, the governance structure for the project, and its purpose. Regarding cumulative impacts assessment, given that in a lot of places, most places around the world, hydropower development has already occurred in many of the basins, there's a great need to reconsider our definition of social and environmental baselines to relate those new projects to the existing development on the basin, and to identify the hierarchical or synergistic links and additive links between projects. And then finally, as I mentioned before, that there are divergent values, divergent beliefs about and understandings on the value of different impacts. And so trying to understand the implications of those divergent values has been quite important. And as one anecdote, I want to illustrate how these public values have changed both over time and how they vary across disciplines. We can take the example of the Grand Coulee on the Columbia River, which was constructed in 1942 and blocked migration of migrating salmon, blocked access of migrating salmon to spawning habitat, to 1,700 miles of spawning habitat. So at the time, some experts acknowledged that the problems that this might generate for salmon, but the public was largely unaware or unconcerned about the implications of that impact. Of course, since that time, public values have changed substantially regarding the value of salmon fisheries, and construction of new dams in the U.S. has severely declined, and billions of dollars is now spent on passing migrating salmon through the system. So we know that this is an anecdotal evidence that values change over time, and that those values are reflected in the policies and economics and strategies for managing rivers. We've also been able to see that salience varies across disciplines and across experiences that folks have. We presented a small decision theater in China in Kunming 2 years ago, and these are some of the results summarized here in this figure. So what we did in this decision theater was that we presented experts with different dam scenarios and asked them to tell us how they valued the magnitude of those 21 different indicators. The results of those surveys are summarized here as net salience. So the 21 are summed up into these net salience values. And there's a couple of points that I'd like to draw your attention to, and I'll not get up this time.
What are you saying? You want to get, you so want to get.
Too much time in the classroom. Okay, so the 2 points I want to draw your attention to. First is that if we sum all the impacts by net benefits or net costs, we see that folks who were self-identified as academics and NGOs found that whether we're talking about dams generally, large hydropower or small hydropower, that they had a net cost, geopolitical, socioeconomic, and biophysical cost on the system, whereas hydropower officials and government representatives tend to find that these projects had net benefits. Same project, same data, same information. This is how they ranked the values of the projects. The other thing that was most striking to us and that we're starting to see some interesting results are differences between large and small hydropower. So what you see is that for academics and NGOs, they found the net cost of large hydropower to be smaller than those to be larger of small hydropower. Whereas the government officials and hydropower representatives found that large hydropower had benefits, but they weren't as great as the small hydropower. So not only are we seeing difference in terms of the derivatives or the qualitative direction of costs and benefits, but also reversal of the magnitude of the effects of the values, not the effects. Reminding you this is salience, not the actual quantitative magnitude. So we're seeing differences in terms of their qualitative direction, but also in terms of their views on small and large hydropower development. And that leads me to the last point, which is that size matters. Thank you. And that it matters in ways that are quite complex. So the existing criteria for distinguishing between large and small hydropower is typically based on generation installed capacity. And we're starting to realize that this is probably not the most reliable way of describing the size of impacts that a dam might have on the river. There are currently no internationally accepted standards for delineating thresholds between large and small hydropower. And therefore, a lot of there's a variable definition across nations and across institutions. The most widely accepted definition of small hydropower includes any station below 10 megawatts of installed capacity. However, some nations with high potential for growth in the small hydropower sector have much larger standard definitions, including India's threshold of 25 megawatts, Brazil's threshold of 30 megawatts, and China's threshold of 50 megawatts. And this is a concern because small hydropower is often described as an environmentally benign alternative to large dams. It's considered to be one of the principal renewable energy technologies available to create sustainable energy futures, particularly in developing countries. Many nations and institutions have thus established policies and financing to intensify future development of small hydropower resources based partly on the assumption that small hydropower is free of the consequences to people and the environment that often plague those large hydropower projects. So we took this tool out to Yunnan province and to ask questions about how small hydropower actually does impact people in the landscape. And in this analysis, we compared 4 large hydropower stations, which are located on this map as the bars, to 22 small stations, which are located on this map as the dots. And the idea was to understand what the true impacts were of these types of projects and to understand the implications of policies that advance small hydropower development. Now, one key thing I want to point out to you immediately is that you'll notice the differences in installed capacity, 10,400 megawatts for the 4 large stations versus 417 megawatts for the small stations. So what we did by analyzing these impacts was then to normalize all of them by the generation capacity. So we have impacts per megawatt, essentially, as a way of analyzing the impacts of the projects. And so what we found actually was quite surprising. And what I've summarized here are just the biophysical impacts, habitat loss, for example, catchment connectivity, conservation lands. For each megawatt of power produced, the small hydropower actually had a greater impact on some aspects of the biophysical system, including a primary impact of length of channel dewatered, impacts on on habitat diversity, flow modification, and water quality. So these results call into question policies such as the clean development mechanism underneath Kyoto Protocol that broadly advocate and provide financial support for small hydropower development. It also illustrates how regulatory and financial programs based on thresholds of installed capacity might not be the most effective at distinguishing projects with small and large impacts on the landscape and on people. So I want to conclude with a couple of reflections regarding the extent of historical and potential future development of hydropower. From this figure, you can see generation of electricity from hydropower is expected to increase as the world seeks renewable low-carbon energy resources. We are thus faced with a really important opportunity to develop our resources in a way that balance the short-term economic gains with long-term outcomes on people and the environment. And I believe there's many examples we can point to in the world where decision-making process has not been successful in producing acceptable outcomes. But I believe strongly that the recent efforts of the World Commission on Dams and the International Hydropower Association's Sustainability Protocol, that we have a reasonable understanding of what makes a hydropower project a good project, and that useful tools are available and need to be used to facilitate transparent and equitable decision-making. So perhaps now what's lacking is the political and economic willpower to open the decision-making process to everyone who stands to gain and lose from so much from it. So thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. And now those pent-up questions. We only have a half hour, so if you can keep your questions or comments succinct, we can get more of you water gurus on the table. Joyce has a microphone. I have one here. And we have to be, we don't want my interns to be climbing over people too much. So I'll pass it, and you guys will be good passers, right? No hogging. All right, we'll start. Oh, there he is. Pete, how about right over here first? Okay, so, and say your name and affiliation real quick so the speakers know who's coming. And Yuan Yuan will interpret the question for Wang Hao afterwards.
Okay, this is the question and comments to Mr. Wang Hao, and to save the interpretation, I will do it myself in Mandarin to asking. Okay, so first of all, I'm from Hong Kong Civic Exchange, and to add up another side of the fact, as Desiree said, the NGOs and the government, they share different side of the story. This is the other side. Question is, when Mr. Wang Hao mentioned about the central government disposed 4 trillion of renminbi just in the past few weeks, it is not into hydropower. I studied the document carefully and talked to the investment forum. It is on water conservancy and rural water capacity improvement. So this is an important fact. We need to get it strict. It's not on hydropower. Of course, as we all understand, the central government maybe said something, but it will be reinterpreted differently from the local government point of view. I hope this is not going to be a story that's turned into purely become a hydropower story. It is not. At least central government doesn't show such the attention. And secondly, Mr. Wang Hao often quoted not only just in a government level, but also the story on the mainstream media. Always like to use the story about the per capita water reservoir ownership sort of thing. And for this particular measurement, I have personally very confused. We know China is a water scarcity country. We're short of water in nature. We have a great population. By nature per se, Chinese may never ever going to reach such a level of per capita water reservoir ownership compared to US. Think if you build a whole dam and water reservoirs in China with a large amount of land with so many population, is it possible by natural resources? We don't have such resources, we already know. And you build those water reservoirs for what? Why do you want to own such ownership to compare to become the number one of the world? So that's what I don't understand. And thirdly, the factors of the 5 cases given by Mr. Wang Hao. The Three Gorge water reservoir considered as a huge successful story. And this year, and it's just happened in China, is a hot debate. Three Gorge water reservoir, does it actually associated with the severe drought that caused we've seen this year, or it is actually a savior of the severe drought? This is unquestionable with a hot debate. So we at least need to get the story balanced.
Is that one question you have for Wang Hao, whether or not Three Gorges Dam? Okay, I need to stop. You're gonna interpret that real quick. Super.
Okay.
Short.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
You're with him all day tomorrow too. Remember, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Yeah,
got
guys,
excited.
She had
Okay.
that pent up stuff going.
Yeah.
Here.
I have serious questions, but let's save some time for the folks. 王先生，不好意思，我讲了一大段的英文。那么我刚才的3个问题，主要的就是3点。第一点就是今年中央水利工作会议，就是最高领导的水利工作会议，4万亿，并不是全部投在那个水电。他讲的是水利，对吗？是治水，而且是农村水利，要改善农村水利为主。
农村水利里头有一部分叫小水电代柴，这个就是小水电。另外4万亿里也有一部分大水电，是一部分，不是全部。
对，而且大水电基本上没有提到。这一个是一个。
Let her interpret what he just said.
Oh,
Yes, I agree with you. That's part of it. That's part of it. Not just not all that goes to hydropower, and part of it goes to water conservancy, and also goes to rural area water conservancy as well.
Yeah, and let me add up. It's largely goes to water conservancy.
第二个
Very
问题
small.
中文。Yeah.
那是绝大部分是去了水利，对吧？
第二个问题。
你第二个问题是什么？
第二个问题就是我们讲的人均库容的拥有量。那么这个人均库容拥有量经常是在国内的媒体上被提到，作为一种先进性的和现代性的一种代表。但其实这个人均库容，中国本身就是一个缺水的国家，我们的人口基数那么大，那么中国从自然资源的分配来讲，即便我们把所有的水库都建在中国，我们可能永远也达不到人均库容跟美国相比，而且这种相比，它的实际意义到底是什么？如果你本身就没有水，水都不够，那么建那么多的库容来，为了什么目的？
不是，它是这样子。中国呢是大陆季风气候，这个70%的水量都在雨季，30%的水量呢是在旱季。那么中国的人口比较多，社会经济发展需要往往要到50%到60%的水量才能支撑社会经济发展。可是枯水季呢只有30%的水量，因此要修很多水库，把洪水转化成有效的水资源。
Well, let me explain this. You know that China is mostly situated in a continental climate zone, and 70% of its precipitation occurs in the rain season, and the 30% occurs in the relatively dry season of the year because of the huge population and as well as the rapid socioeconomic development. We have to have about 50 to 60% of the water resources in order to support the economic development. So if you look at the uneven distribution of the precipitation across the year, 70% and 30%, that's why we need to transform transform flood into water resources through building reservoirs and dams.
Okay, here there is another major misleading.
No, but you're with him all day tomorrow. So we can share in the room? Can you do your third question and we'll continue this discussion tomorrow? Yeah.
Okay.
You have all day tomorrow with him.
Yeah, but this is a publicly misleading problem. I just want to clarify. This is based on the assumption that rainforest, if we don't capture it, it will run freely, just wasted. It's not true. The rainforest actually collected by the river systems. You already run through the river. They're satisfied not only just for hydropower, but also satisfied for the nature need, for the wetland, for the water nourishment, for the hydraulical, ecological, all kinds of purpose. It's not only just wasted. So that's what I want to clarify. And my third question is about the success.
你告诉他中文。
Sorry. 第三个问题就是说，那5个例子成功的例子，您举例说的。那么其实这5个例子， 其中的好几个例子，并不是说我们设计的很成功，而是为了纠正以前的错误。小浪底是因为三门峡的失败，三门峡失败了以后，我们修了小浪底来纠正以前的错误，而三峡我们才建了这么短的时间，是不是就能够决定它现在就是成功的？二滩它建了以后，它的这个发电的效益是很大，但是二滩带来的攀枝花的污染，攀枝花整个的城市现在已经变成一个。如果您在那里去走一走，你会感觉呼吸都很困难。那么这种例子我们可以不断的举例。我就是认为您说的这5个例子，它的成功的一面，我们更多的是看到它发电的成功，而它在其他方面对环境、对社会、对移民等等的一些综合的评估，我们其实现在下结论为时过早，而且我们的那些事实呢，并没有完全的放到桌面上来讲。
不是，你对这个长江啊、黄河呀、了解十分的有限，太肤浅了。这个黄河上啊，全流域一共是7个大型水电站，这个三门峡也是一个，小浪底也是一个。这7个电站，上3个电站呢，主要是为了水量的调蓄和水力发电。这个后4个电站呢，主要是处理泥沙和防洪问题，这个各有各的用途。这个小浪底不是跟三门峡扯不上什么关系，都是黄河本身的这个事情。希望你再更多的了解一点。
If I may say that your knowledge of Yangtze and Yellow River might be limited, and let me explain a little bit. Just in the Yellow River system, there are 7 major hydro projects, including Sanmensha and Xiaolangdi, right? Xiaolangdi, and actually the first 3 major hydro projects on the Yellow River is for power generation and water volume regulation, and the other 4 are mostly for sediment control management and flood control. And I don't see a direct association. As a matter of fact, there's no direct association between Sanmensha and Xiaolangdi.
Okay, we're going to keep moving on here. Pete, you handed it. I'll hand it over there, and then. There you go, sir.
Mr. Hao, I'd like to ask you a question in a different vein.
Say who you are.
Oh, I'm Randall Doyle, and I'm from U.S. State Department and Bureau of Humanity and Human Rights and so forth. But I'm writing a book on modern China, and one of the policies I've come across is this plan to urbanize China, 60%, I believe, by 2030, 2040. But with the reality of the water situation in China, is this a wise government policy at a time? Because obviously, the more you urbanize a population, generally the more water it's going to use per capita. If you have a serious water condition, as China does in the northeastern part of its country, and the global trend in Russia and Australia and many other places of drought conditions, it seems to me that there's going to be a train wreck, so to speak, between this policy of trying to urbanize China and the ability of the government to supply the proper amount of water to sustain an urbanized population.
好，王先生，我来自我介绍一下，我是来自于美方国务院的，我是国务院的一个研究员，我现在在写有关在写一本有关于现在中国的书。您刚才提到的中国的城市化问题，当时是你提的这个目标是，或者是预期的目标，大概是到2030年，中国城市化的大概会是达到60%，那60以上 ，OK above 60% actual urbanization rate。那现在我们就面临的一个水环境的这个现状，我们都知道就是。如果你城市化程度越高的话，那么这个用水量它的这个需求它的用量也就随之会增长。所以我现在就在思考，这是否是中国政府一个明智的一个决策，就是说快速的大规模的进行国家的这个城市化。我们一看到了华北缺水的这个状态，还有很多其他国家也现在正在经历的一些缺水。那么现在就能否请你给大家就是介绍一下这方面，就是说中国在城市化方面的进程和政策。
There are always 2 sides to everything.
Wait a minute, he speaks English?
这个城市化是这样子，这个因为中国的人均土地很少，这个要想农业现代化呢，必须把大量的这个创造更多的就业机会呢。 把人移到城市来。中国现在的城市人口呢是6亿人，未来到2030年的时候呢，城市人口要达到9亿人以上。城市化率呢，从现在的44%呢上升到60%以上，要到64%、65%。这个呢是现代化进程中重要的一个结构转换。
As you know that China's per capita land ownership is very low, and in order to modernize the agriculture of the country, at the same time create a lot of job opportunities, we need to move people from the rural areas to the city, to the urban areas. And currently, 600 million. There's 600 million population living in cities and urban areas, and by 2030, we expect that about 900 million people will be living in urban areas. That's the urban population. And so it's going to be an increase of the current 44% of urbanization to 60%, above 60%, around 60% of urbanization by 2030.
这个从水的方面来讲呢，一个人生活在农村，中国的这个农业呢是大陆季风气候下的灌溉农业。一个农民呢，他的有2亩到3亩地，这个灌溉的水量呢，要800方以上。他要转移到城市来说呢，这个拿北京做例子，现在北京一个人1年的水只有120方，但是也过得很好。
Okay. Well, let me give you an example in terms of water use. And for example, a villager, a peasant in China living in rural areas, and he typically has 2 to 3 acres of land, and because of the continental climate of China, he yearly needs to irrigate his land. So in order to irrigate 2 to 3 acres of land a year, and he needs to have access to 800 cubic meters of water per year. And if we look at the average water consumption of urban resident in Beijing, that's about 120 cubic meter, 120立方米, right?
对。24亿2千万人口，没错。
I mean, your question was actually, you're really asking a water, energy, food question.
China going to find the water? Where is China going to find the water, considering the global trends of drought and all the countries? Many countries are dealing with this, but with the urbanization of China, where are they going to find the water?
Just for the webcast, where are they going to find the water is what he said.
就介于这个全球的这个干旱的这个趋势，那么中国从哪里去找到这些支持城市化的水源？
这个现在中国呢，从几个方面来找到支持现代化的水源。一个呢，就是提高用水效率。倡导进行节水型社会的建设。这个举例来说，现在这个北京、天津、深圳，这些城市的用水水平呢，不如美国最先进的用水效率，但是已经达到了美国全国平均的用水效率。这是提高用水效率。
Okay. I think the Chinese government is approaching this from different perspectives in order to find water resources to support the modernization of the country. At first is to increase water efficiency, water usage efficiency by conserving. And the goal we have is to build a water conservation society. And if we look at the situation in Beijing, Tianjin, and Shenzhen, the urban water usage efficiency, it is not as good as the best standard in the United States, but it's almost as good as the average standard of water usage efficiency in the United States in these 3 cities, Beijing, Tianjin, and Shenzhen.
这个另一方面呢，就是4万亿投资里很大一方面是改善农业的用水效率。多搞一点喷灌、滴灌，激光土地平整，以节约灌溉用水量。
Well, as we mentioned, that the $4 trillion investment, and a large part of it will go to rural area water conservancy and to improve irrigation technology in order to increase the efficiency.
再有呢，就是当地水资源的挖潜，这个包括建更多一点的水库，包括利用再生水和海水淡化的这个水，最后呢，一个手段是跨流域调水。
Well, another approach is to optimize the local water resource potential. Or optimize it locally by building smaller dams, or to recycle, or to desalinization, to desalinize seawater. And then another approach is to transfer water from across regions.
Long-distance diversion.
Yeah, long-distance diversion.
Water diversion.
He speaks English, you guys. He's fooling us all. One thing I want to note is that, look at the 12th five-year plan, and one thing that I'm thinking that we may hopefully be seeing in China. We've known that in the past couple plans that China's become very comprehensive in dealing with the energy efficiency problem, right? Carbon, CO2. And I think, and they've been fairly effective. And we haven't seen that with water, but I think that this is coming. The crises around water that you've identified, that's just one of them, that they are moving forward. But we are here to talk about dams. Could I have a dam question? Okay, she's like looking super eager there, but right in the middle. Joyce, her right in the middle. It's about dams, and it's a question.
It's from Kristen. It's about
It's about dams. I want it succinct.
Okay, my name is Kristen McDonald from Pacific Environment. 我是麦克汀，来自太平洋环境组织。My question is, are there any places in China where dams should not be built? And if so, how is this being determined at the policy level? 我的问题就是在中国有没有地方应该不修水电站？如果有的话，这个政策是怎么来自，怎么解决？
这个现在呢，关于不修水电站的地方只有一个，就是怒江，它是唯一一个没有开发的这个河流，但是呢，也存在着巨大的争论，因为这个当地搞环境的一些人呢。认为这个保持一条江河的原生态，对环境是好的，但是呢，当地的老百姓啊，不太满意。当地的老百姓认为他们太贫困了，太落后了，又没有电力，又没有能源，又没有稳定的供水水源。这个当地的老百姓倒想这个赶快发展起来。赶快也建设水电站。
Currently, there's only one river in China that's off limit. That's Nu River, and nothing has been built on Nu River yet. And currently, there's a huge debate, and it's a big controversy in China as well. And I know some local environmentalists they would prefer to keep the pristine ecosystem of the river. But if, the local people's opinions are different because they are very poor. They don't have energy supply. They don't have stable water supply, and they don't have energy resources locally. So they want to improve their livelihood. They are not satisfied with the status quo, and in a way that they give their support to the hydropower project.
Okay, a dam question. Oh yeah, and you got the mic, so you can ask him, man.
Yes. My name is Hanling Yang. I'm from Vermont Law School. I have a question for Mr. Docksmith regarding the protocol. My question is, what would be the incentives for the developers or companies to use the protocol to access the projects? Because most of the time, I think companies who are complying with EIA standards or for equator banks, they have better financing access. For protocol, what will be the benefits for a company to use that? Thank you.
Okay. It's a good question, and I think one that will be asked many times. A protocol assessment will deliver recommendations. So at the most basic level, the operator or the developer gets recommendations from multidisciplinary, very likely international team on a whole range of different topic areas, some of which they may not be so familiar with. So there is a substantive, tangible benefit in the recommendations. That I would say is the first point. The second key point is that it provides a platform for shared dialogue. So by carrying out a protocol assessment, a developer or an operator can engage with stakeholders that have views or comments or understandings or misunderstandings on a particular development, and actually have a process of consultation and a platform for shared dialogue with them. And that could be with government agencies or NGOs or whoever, community-based organizations. Thirdly, I would say that, and it's an extension really of the second point, there could be value in carrying out a protocol assessment in order to satisfy a regulator if a regulator, for instance, felt that there was a need to conduct some sort of assessment beyond regulatory requirements. I do want to emphasize, though, that the protocol does not in any way replace regulatory requirements, and in fact part of the assessment concerns whether regulatory obligations have been met or not. And then finally, I would say that the final incentive is if a developer is seeking finance, then it may be the case that a financial institution would recommend that the developer or the operator carries out an assessment because they want to see in particular areas how the project performs and what they could agree with the developer or operator in order to improve performance as a condition of finance. But also, again, I would be at pains to emphasize that it does not replace normal due diligence processes or lenders' environmental review processes that that an equator bank, for example, might ask their clients to go through.
Okay, another quick damn question. How about move the mic over here, and you two, we're going to do ask two, right, one after another. Succinct, Dwanidyar, right? Go.
Hi, my name is Katie. I'm with International Rivers, we're a nonprofit based in Berkeley. And I have a comment and a quick question for Mr. Smith about HSAP. You've emphasized quite a bit that this process was a multi-stakeholder process, but for the information of people in the room, there was very limited involvement of Southern NGOs. And in this panel, you emphasized WWF several times, and I'd like to say that WWF definitely does not represent a lot of civil society groups. So to also let people know that we, International Rivers, and about 66 other NGOs and dam experts and dam affected community and indigenous organizations have signed on to a statement that urges our governments and other institutions not to endorse HSAP because it risks weakening existing social and environmental standards, and was produced from this largely closed process, which is in stark contrast with the World Commission on Dams in 2000. HSAP, for instance, does not define a baseline of acceptability for projects, and it does not require projects to follow international conventions and norms like the WCD. So I guess my first question is how we respond to that. And second, you'd also mentioned that assessors would follow a code of conduct. And if you could explain that a bit, because as our experience with assessors or consultant validators of dam projects, like in the clean development mechanism, the issue of quality assurance is a very critical issue. So how would you assure the quality of those assessments? Thank you.
Yeah. To respond to your first point or point, the development of the protocol was not a closed process. It was an open process. There was a forum, the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Forum, consisting of a range of different members, as I've said repeatedly today, NGOs, governments, and financial organizations. Each of those had a reference group in the segment or sector, if you like, consisting of a range of further organisations that they consulted with between the forum sessions. It was an open process. As for risking weakening existing international standards, the protocol should not do that. What it is a system, a consistent framework for assessing a very complex range of sustainability issues. And it makes reference to regulatory requirements. The great benefit of a protocol assessment is it's not that it gives any kind of stamp of approval for a project or certifies a project as sustainable. It does not do that. Rather, it creates a framework, an assessment according to a consistent framework, which can be readily interpreted and communicated. And so stakeholders involved in that project or with an interest in that project can discuss things very clearly. That's its great value over and above international norms such as the WCD criteria and guidelines, which incidentally were drawn upon in the development of the protocol, as were IFC standards and World Bank safeguard policies. Regarding the code of conduct, it's a very good question, and it's something that we are developing right now as we speak. And we are talking to organizations which have expertise in establishing systems of accreditation to devise the right kind of system for accrediting assessors, and also, of course, maintaining those systems. So, for instance, an accredited assessor would be likely to be required to maintain their status on an annual basis. One final little thing on a slightly lighter-hearted note: the acronym HSAP, unfortunately, we can't use because SAP contacted us, the computer programmers, and said that we must not use the acronym HSAP. So the protocol would be better.
Okay, so I think quick question here, and I think that might close us out. But
well, my name is Vichun. I'm from Thailand. I work for the Mekong River Commission, but I'm not here to represent the organization. I'm here on my own capacity. I have a question on transparent decision making. China, Vietnam, and Laos, they are all socialist countries. And from the presentation from China, it is very clear that China wants more dams. And in the case of Laos PDR, the government has made it very clear that Laos wants to be the battery of Southeast Asia by saying that it means the Lao government will build more dams on the Mekong River to sell electricity to Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia. And Mekong is an international river. And there are now 8 big dams planned in the China part, and a list of more than 100 dams along the river from the lower part of the river. So my question is, when we're talking about being transparent in making the decision, I think it's very much has to do with the political system of each country along the international river. For example, in Thailand, dam building is no longer possible. That's why, Thailand moved to Laos to buy electricity. It's the same when, in 1980, we announced logging ban. Now Thai companies moved to Myanmar, moved to Cambodia, moved to other countries. So this is happening, in that international setting. So my question is, how do we deal with that transparent decision making?
Want to interpret that to him, Rob? Who do you want to answer that question? It could be. Maybe start here. Do you want to say something? I think it's you.
Oh, good.
And you can't stand up. You got to sit down and answer that question, lady.
Thanks for your question, Fatun. I think that's a really great question. And it's something that we reflected on a couple of years ago when we did this decision theater in Kunming, that there was not, that the attendees were uncomfortable with being asked questions about their values. They were not used to this participatory type of process. When I teach in China and Taiwan, it's the same thing. The students get really uncomfortable when I ask them questions because they're used to people, used to the sort of, they're not used to being engaged as part of the decision process. But I don't think that that means it's not possible. I think by the end of our meeting, I felt like people were much more comfortable asking questions, speaking freely about their values and what was important to them. So while it's maybe a new or unfamiliar process for folks in that region or with with a non-democratic society, I don't think that it's impossible. I think it's just there's maybe some transition time to get people comfortable with expressing what their needs and values are.
If I can interject, not specifically dams, but I mean, starting in 2008, that China did start this open government initiative. Lots of bumps on the way, but the Ministry of Environmental Protection the same day issued the Open Environmental Information Measures, and you get a lot of people actually asking for information in China on not just dams, but a lot of issues. And so I mean, it's definitely there's some politically there's some movement in China pushing for transparency. And again, we've got people in the room who, don't tie your knickers in knots. There's a lot of problems with it, but that the fact that there's this, that they're talking about open information. But that's why I think that these kind of tools that these guys, the assessment and their tools here, I think are really useful because, I mean, you're saying, and I fancy too, Doug, that yours is also an educational process too for the players. So I think that, there's hope. I don't know. Let's see if Wang Hao's got something to close us out on. Something Confucian, perhaps. Because he has to close us out, right? And that was a great question, by the way.
这方面我也不太熟悉。
Necessarily familiar in this aspect.
But didn't you say that his institute is working with you on the protocol, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But maybe it's not his department.
Yeah, possibly.
Okay. Well, actually, I mean, it's I've gone a little bit past that. Was there like one absolutely burning question you're going to cry in your pillow tonight if you don't ask it out there? There it is. She would cry in her pillow. All right. Last question. Because, we don't want tears. It's such a wastage of water.
I really appreciate. I was gonna have a rough night on my pillow if I didn't get to ask this question. My question is
Who are you?
Oh, my name is Christine Boyle. I'm a postdoc at the University of North Carolina, and also work on China and especially irrigation governance. So my question is for Mr. Wang Hao. Will you and your organization, do you think you will ever integrate these types of decision-making tools into your decision-making, dam development decision-making processes?
我的名字叫 Christian， 我是来自于北卡罗来纳大学，在那儿做博士后。我的这个研究的方向呢是中国的这个水资源或者是灌溉的管理。那刚才我们提到的这些，就是说征集公众意见是做决定用的这些工具或者用的这些衡量的标准。那我想请问，就是中国政府或者是你所在的这些部门，能否是否打算在今后的这个工作中呢，也把他们就是说综合利用起来，或者是就是把它纳入了一个做决定的这样一个过程当中？
这个中国就是说，根据中国的有一个水法，是这个水事行为的最高准则。根据这个水法呢，先要做流域规划，具体一个大坝建还是不建，怎么建，流域里一共要建多少大坝。怎么协调防洪、发电、灌溉、航运、供水，生态保育，这之间的关系，都要通过流域规划来解决。
Well, there is a water law in China, as that is the highest level of legislation when it comes to water practice in the country. And the first we need to do under the regulations and rules of the water law is to have watershed planning, and that would include different aspects. For example, flood control, power generation, irrigation, the drinking water supply, as well as ecosystem conservation and protection. All these need to be considered in the face of watershed planning, and whether a dam needs to be built or it should not be built. And all these are different aspects that are taken into consideration.
比如中国呢，在过去的从2000年开始，花了8年时间，中央一共9个部委。这个就是农业部啊、环境部啊、建设部啊、水利部啊、国家气象局啊、国家林业局啊，这些一共9个部委联合进行了一次这样的流域规划，花了8年时间，把全国分成1043个分区，这个详细规划了。这个到2030年为止的这个开发活动，这个规划呢是由这个专业部门都是技术人员参加的，做出初步的规划以后呢，征求各省各流域里的各地市，和不同的行政部门之间的意见。然后呢，这个国务院进行仲裁，现在这个规划已经得到批准了。
Well, starting year 2000, the central government organized a team that consisted of 9 government agencies and committees that would include agriculture, environmental protection, water resources, and forestry, and so on. So 9 central government agencies and commissions conducted an 8-year project. Eventually finished it in 2008. That is watershed planning. And this watershed planning divided the entire country into 1,043 local regions and gave detailed planning and design for the next 20 years of development. So that's for it's until 2030, and the team is consisted of technology experts and people who have knowledge in this area. And after the planning is completed, the watershed plan is completed, it was sent to provinces, various provinces, municipalities, and also the administrative agencies of these places for feedback and to collect the local information and opinions. And currently it has been approved by the State Council.
这个规划完成以后呢，凡是规划中列入的项目呢，然后就可以进行这个建设。建设需要这个进行环境影响评价呀，需要做这个可行性研究啊。做单个项目的可行性研究，然后就是施工建设，然后都建好了以后呢，就是一套运行管理综合调度，integrated water resources management.
So for the projects that are included in this watershed planning, the overall watershed planning, before it's constructed, before the project begins, there needs to be an environmental impact assessment as well as a feasibility assessment. And then after that's passed, you move on to construction. And then the next phase would be the operation of the project and all this related integrated comprehensive management of the entire project. This has to be done individually for each project.
So there are many opportunities for these kinds of tools to be brought into the integrated water management.
你说是一个综合的，您刚才说是这个综合的这个管理或者运作的话，在这个过程当中，就是对每个项目都是进行这样处理的。那么意思就是说是我们刚才谈到的这些，就是做决定的这些工具和这些就是说标准的话，都有可能就是被运用到其中，是吗？
对。 All right. We've solved that problem. Right. Thank you so much. Let's applaud these speakers one more time. And since I have all you water people here, a lot of you are new to me. I would love you to join the China Environment Forum Mafia. We do a lot on water. Choke Point China. We're starting part 2 about how energy and water are coming together. So people who are like writing books on water in China should give us your business cards so you become part of the crew. Thank you very much, everyone.